I think we'll get started. Good morning, and thank you for joining us at the Housing and Economic Development Committee meeting. It was July 22nd, 2021. Thank you all for being here. We have one change to the agenda. But first, do we have any public comment, Kathy? Okay, and anyone from the public here? We actually have a public here. It's great. All right. Thank you. The change that we have is a resolution from workforce development. So if I can get, everybody should have a copy. I can get a motion to add that to the agenda. Moved by Sean, second by Henry. All in favor? Hands. All right, that is added to the agenda. I think let's put it under number 10, workforce development. Okay, Natalie is not nodding. Thank you very much. All right, County Administrator. Good morning, Lisa.
Good morning. Just a very brief report on my end. So the month of July, my staff were involved with meeting with departments and agencies on budgetary matters, so that's going well. And just a note that would be relevant to this committee, aware of the city's process for considering proposals for ARP funds. They have a committee that will be meeting to review proposals related to economic development, and county staff will be attending that meeting next week. We've been invited to stay apprised of what the city plans to do with our funds and economic development. So we'll keep each other informed of that process or of decisions.
That's really good news. Thank you. All right. And Henry.
Is that a public meeting?
I do not know if it's a public meeting.
The city,
It's an internal, it's an internal group with staff of city and county.
okay, and I didn't understand that they had solicited proposals. And in fact, Tom Knight sent me their application. So, okay, so that's good stuff. And did you discuss ARP with TCAT last month? I think you talked about it.
I'm trying to remember now the last TCAT meeting, it did come up, I believe we discussed it. Yes, and I mean, many of the municipalities who participate aren't even yet fully aware of the amounts that they're going to be receiving and so forth. So, but we did share to date what the county's process had been. So continue to keep that group updated.
That's great. Good, thank you very much. Anything else, Lisa?
Oh, I think that's it for me.
All right, any questions? All right, thank you, Lisa, appreciate it. Let us move to the first name and the title of our committee, Housing and Economic Development Committee. Welcome, Ithaca Neighborhood Housing Services. And Hannah Anderson is here in person, and Delia Yarrow is on the screen. Welcome. Delia, you want to take it for an update on our CDBG rental assistance program?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. Sorry I'm not there in person. I got a little cold, so I'm trying to keep that out of the public sphere. Yeah, so we wanted to report back on your CDBG funds. Last June, we launched an emergency rental assistance program with the assistance of the planning department and your permission to respond to the COVID-19 epidemic. In the course of the last year, we've gotten 163 applications that were outside the city of Ithaca, inside Tompkins County, many more in the full service area that we were working with. And we were able to help 71 of them with CDBG funding, and then additional with other pots of money we had, depending on what was most advantageous for the renter. We've seen a huge drop off in the number of people coming to us now that there is the OCHA ERAP program that can provide much more significant rental assistance. Obviously, they're not limited to 3 months like we were with this funding. So we're very happy that's in effect. And we sent an email out to everybody who applied, whether or not we could help them, and all of the landlords we had contact information for, to say, hey, this ERAP funding is here in case you have additional needs. So we just want to say thank you again to the planning staff. So much work went into, small dollar amounts to try to relieve some of the stress of the pandemic. And we received a lot of positive feedback from folks who really needed that help at that point, whether they were quarantining or lost income or whatever. So, thank you guys again for making that happen.
Thank you so much, Delia. That really was critical when there was no idea that there would be federal rental assistance. So, and thanks to our planning staff that invented the idea, that the New York State said, oh, that's a good idea. So it was great to work with you on that. Comments or questions from Henry?
Yes, were there any funds left over?
So there's about $20,000 left in what we had for that pot, and our idea is that we will look to transfer that funding to help a low-income homeowner with repairs. We have a long wait list for that. Some of the funding that was the original intended use of the funding, and then we modified some of it for emergency rental.
And
Thank you for the report, Delia. You said 73 people you were able to help with the rental assistance. Over what period did you say that was?
That is since last June.
Since last June. Okay, thank you.
I know the application process was cumbersome and pretty strict requirements. So 163 applications. 71 is a great number, but you feel like that. I know we were frustrated hearing about the barriers because of the CDBG requirements. So, all right, well, thank you very much. Your partnership is always really important in making these things work. All right, anything else for Delia? Thanks, Delia. Please stay. Love to have you just listen in. Thanks. And Johanna Anderson, welcome.
Well, thank you very much. It is wonderful to see all of you in person and not in the box or having to remind each other to unmute ourselves. So I think the last 18 months have made believers out of all of us that housing is essential, and that having a safe place to live is really critical to everybody's well-being and our ability just to function on a daily basis. We were very, very fortunate that when New York Pause first started, the governor quickly identified affordable housing as essential. So we were able to continue our services once we had submitted all of our safety plans, which is wonderful because we have about 500 rental units right now. We had, at that time, we had 2 developments that were midway through construction. And so, for those first couple of days, we were all very concerned if construction were to stop, what is going to happen to the half-built building that's there. So we were able to complete the 2 developments. Those came online earlier this spring. And also during that last year, as Delia mentioned, we transitioned when we were not able to help people buy their first homes because that was not allowed for a time being. We were able to help people with rental assistance. And we were able to, when we weren't able to do repairs on people's homes, we were able to repurpose our staff to actually do work on INHS properties, which was really wonderful to make sure that everybody stayed employed. And actually we added a few new positions. So we also, Delia's department also did a wonderful job with administering an anchor storefront loan to help keep businesses here in Ithaca remain open. During this time, we were able to add 111 units of rental housing across 3 counties. So we've been busy, and it also, you know, it didn't stop us from looking ahead and making sure that our pipeline was full. So what do we have going forward? Right now, I won't tell you the exact location, but we have 12 beds that are in 2 buildings, 4 units. And our intent is to use those units for reentry and reintegration. We are working with OAR and URO on doing this. We are very excited about the potential positive impacts that this will have on our local shelter, as well as recidivism rates. I don't think that a program like this has ever been tried before at this scale. So we are looking forward to seeing how the ongoing reporting of this and what kinds of true positive impacts happen on this. In addition to that, in about 3 weeks, we are closing on our first manufactured home community up in Trumansburg. It is 138 pads, and it comes on about 100 acres of ag land. So with that, we received grants from the state, and we intend to make improvements immediately to the infrastructure, to the roads, the water and sewer, the landscaping. We intend to install additional exterior lighting, put in a playground, and add a community center. We are working with the village of Trumansburg to really design a neighborhood. My primary goal is to make sure that there's connectivity from this community to the village through walking trails and future sidewalks. So we are very excited about that. We are going to start doing, probably this fall or early spring, really do a comprehensive charrette with village residents and elected officials about what they envision for this space and how we can make it possible. In addition to that, we've got Founder's Way, which is the old Immaculate Conception School. That went under construction starting in May. And it is going to be 75 units, 71 units of rental, affordable rental housing, and 4 units of for sale housing. There will also be some nonprofit space available in there as well. Construction seems to be going pretty well. At this point, we anticipate it being completed by late 2022. It's about an 18-month construction time period. And we're doing our best to time the construction of it with keeping in mind the fact that you have an elementary school next door. So we want to make sure that we're as we can be as least disruptive as possible. So I mentioned there are 4 CHT units there for our community housing trust. We're now up to 64 homes in the community housing trust. Our 65th home is our first one in Seneca County. For the first time this year, we added 2 new community housing trust homes that are at 100% AMI. And we are very excited. We've got 24 more community housing trust homes in our pipeline. 2 of them are in Freeville. 4 are obviously at Founder's Way, and we've got 10 in Trumansburg as part of the Village Grove development up there, which is the first development that we have done that has achieved Passive House certification. It was also, the development was awarded in the first round, the New York State Governor's Buildings of Excellence Award. So this has received quite a bit of attention, and we are incredibly proud of it. As part of our CHT, we were fortunate enough to receive, as part of an enterprise grant, funding to allow for a community housing trust program manager. We've never had this before. Our community housing trust has always been spread across about 4 different departments. And so by centralizing it with 1 staff person to really take the reins and really manage this program, you can see the tremendous amount of growth that we've been able to have with this. That funding is set to expire in September. I am able to, with our budget, keep this person on their staff through the end of the year. But I am desperately looking for funds to continue the salary for this person. One of the things that we have been talking about for our community housing trust is an opt-in program where current homeowners can put their house into the housing trust. We're working through the specifics of it and what sorts of eligibility requirements we'll have for the potential homeowner. We are also looking to pilot what would be workforce housing in the community housing trust, which would be homes that are priced for households making up to 120% of area median income. And we're trying to come up with creative strategies to address that missing middle. So these are just a few of the things that we have in our current pipeline right now. If you were to talk to me next week, there will probably be 1 or 2 more projects that have come along that we said, yes, there's a demand, there's a clear demand out there. And we are doing our best to meet that demand as best that we can. I will say that as much demand as there has been, we're also seeing more challenges. As if affordable housing were easy before, it has become incredibly challenging for us now. We're seeing massive material shortages. And the problem with it is that it's not the same material. It'll be different ones at different times, at different points of construction. And we, as the developer, have no choice but to meet that or fill that gap at that time, because we can't stop the construction from moving forward. In addition to that, we are having massive labor shortages, not just for our own staff members, but for our contractors with subs. We cannot find the labor, so the labor that we do have is coming at a much higher price. What this is doing for our existing development costs, it's inflating the budgets by as much as 25%. There are not a lot of affordable housing sources that we do not have. So when we have a shortfall of 20 to 25% in a budget, there are not additional pots of money that are available. So what I would, I guess my request is to find some flexible funding. I do need a general fund that I can plug into various projects as these holes come up. So I would be willing to entertain any kind of questions that you may have. And I appreciate you allowing us to have this time here.
Thank you, Johanna. I mean, Jess has been just such a stalwart in every development that we've partnered with you on through the Community Housing Development Fund. Things have gone successfully as promised, and they really made a huge difference in the community. So it's great to hear your plans and wishes, and let's open it up to committee. Mike.
How much? You could just ballpark it.
Ballpark, I would say for our current pipeline, these projects that I discussed right now.
I was thinking you said you wanted to do like a fund. So
I would say 2 million would be phenomenal. And it would make sure that all of these projects made it to fruition.
You're speaking to us at a time when, shockingly, that doesn't send us fleeing from the room. So, for the first time ever in 20 years. That's what I was thinking.
How much for the?
Well, Sean had a yeah.
You mentioned that you were working with OER for reentry and reintegration housing, and I was wondering, is that going to serve men or women?
It'll be men.
Okay. And will it be sober living or
are you allowing for more harm reduction model?
So OER is actually, the way that we're anticipating this working is that INHS, we own the buildings and we do the management of it through maintenance and, you know, the rental collection and whatnot. OAR has a program that they are running. So one of those beds will actually be reserved for an OAR staff member so that they're actually living on site and can be there as more of a mentor. The staff member would have been a graduate from this program and really help the other men make sure that they make it to appointments, work on applications and interview skills and things like that. So I believe at this point, we're looking at a 2 to 3 year pilot to see, because at this point, we just have ideas about the kinds of impacts that it will have on the community. And so to actually find out what these metrics actually are, I think is going to be very helpful for us to find permanent funding going forward.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that you're working with OAR. I know that they have Endeavor House and
Yes.
there were a lot of kinks along the way. And, you know, they realized that they needed a house manager to, you know, kind of stay on the premises and help people as they transition. My other question is that you mentioned the manufactured housing in Trumansburg, and I know that there was pushback whenever there was a development that was planned a few years ago. I was wondering, I can't imagine there's not going to be pushback, and how INHS plans to deal with that.
So we have actually had nothing but really positive feedback about purchasing this community. And I think the reason for that is because we've been very clear about the types of improvements we intend to make. And our intent right now is, obviously, we've been in close communication with the village about this and keeping them abreast of our plans. After we purchase and close on the park, I intend to meet with all of the residents and introduce INHS to them. We are working with Keynote Realty out of Rochester that specializes in managing manufactured home communities. And so that property manager will be meeting with me. We've also invited all of the elected officials from Trumansburg to join in as well, so that we can really make sure that this is a cooperative effort. And so I'm quite pleased about this. And I think having a formal charrette process for envisioning these, I think it's around 60 acres. I think that's going to be really, really helpful. And my intent is that I'm actually going to hire a third party to facilitate that charrette so that we can make sure that everybody is fully aware of the process.
I think it's an existing mobile home park. It's not a new.
It is.
thing. It's just, okay. We'll do. Henry and then Annie.
Yeah, Jen, I thought that the reentry program was going to be co-ed. I thought that there was, I know before when I talked to someone about it, they said that it would be women and men.
That may be for another spot that they're working on, but this one with INHS, we've always discussed it as all men. Because the idea was trying to reduce the impacts on the shelter. And so that, to my knowledge, we have never had any discussions about co-ed.
Is my understanding from speaking with OARs, perhaps they were going to move the female population more to Endeavor House, the existing, and then focus all with males with the INHS project.
Okay, thank you.
Mixing the two would be problematic. I've always talked about having separate facilities. Annie?
Yes, thank you for everything that you and I just do. So a couple of questions for the mobile home park that you're buying, all those. So I'm glad to hear about the improvements, especially it sounds like the sidewalk, possibly on Main Street. When I lived there on Main Street in the 80s, that was supposed to have been done. So it's planned, long-term plans to connect, you know, that whole area of the village with the downtown farmers market. So glad to hear that, hopefully that will come to fruition, so that they can safely walk rather than in the street on people's properties. As far as the rent, so I'm glad to hear about the improvements. Will the rents be going up for the mobile home?
No. So, and there are a few community-owned homes that are rented, not just a lot rent, but the actual unit is rented. And we've already done assessments of those, and those that do not meet our standards will be removed and demolished and replaced with a brand new one. We have looked at, initially, we really wanted to do net zero homes. Unfortunately, those are about $200,000 a unit for about 400, 600 square feet. So not yet, we can't do that just yet, but we are looking at doing all electric units, and so those will be put in. I'm also very grateful to say that on staff, we have an entire department that is certified to repair and improve manufactured housing. So that's really wonderful for all of the residents that live there. And we have a few vacant pads that we will be bringing in additional new homes, whether it be if somebody wants to own their own home and bring it on, that's fine, or if we may end up just purchasing some more and adding them in, because we know that it's a high demand community.
Right, for people that have been there, some homes are in good shape, and there's quite a few that are in really rough shape, gone door to door there quite a few times. The last, as far as, I'm trying to think of the latest iteration of the name of the other, is it Grove?
Village Grove.
Village Grove. Any update on that?
So right now, that is being prepared to go in for its 9% low-income housing tax credit application. The funding round application is due in August, and so we should hear back probably right around Thanksgiving.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
And so if you get approval for that in Thanksgiving, we'll start in the spring.
So normally, when awards occur, you are given 6 months to get to construction closing. And so there's a lot of, our developers end up having to make sure that they get all of the pricing done, and it really ends up being a lot of paperwork scramble for those 6 months, and then you get to the construction closing and commence. And most of our developments are usually around an 18-month build-out. Trumansburg is going to be a little bit different because we do have the for sale housing in there, and we've also got market rate housing that's going to be mixed in together.
Anyway,
Just one last question. So for you were talking about the possible, it's possible fund that would be great to have, a $2 million fund. So this would be a fund you would draw down, not replenishing.
If we have the ability to put money back into it, that would be wonderful. But at this point, I think it would be drawn down.
Thank you.
for example, on Village Grove, I think you were saying legal costs and the delays. What's the gap from Village Grove from the original?
About 600,000. And so when we have gaps like this, what ends up happening is that INHS will fill it with our own cash. And the cash that we fill it with, normally it's used for pre-development that then gets paid back. So then you're sending out money that will never be paid back, and it's quite challenging to continue on a pipeline like that.
Thank you, Johanna. I mean, I think we hear about construction delays and hiccups with market rate units with private contractors, and so this is all just multiplied with the kinds of projects and the kind of packages you have to put together in order to make sure that the renter or the owner actually can have a product at an affordable price. I mean, the math just doesn't work unless there's a miracle. And I think mean, it feels like this is exactly the sort of thing we should be looking for, whether it's fund balance or ARPA money, because these are unique circumstances. These are log jams and gaps in projects that are not only in the pipeline, but in some cases in the ground already, just not to actually get these units and this prior investment of time and money to pay off. The gaps have to be filled somehow.
You're absolutely right. To give you an example, last week, we have a project going right now that has a total development cost of $900,000. And the contractor got back to us and said, new lumber pricing adds an additional $300,000. So this is a project that we already have shovels in the ground. So this is the type of thing that we're dealing with on every single one of our projects. And I think it's frankly quite unprecedented. We've never experienced anything like this, and every single day it seems to be something new. So COVID brings us continued gifts of surprise. So.
And I really appreciate the idea that you're diving into the mobile home area. We've already identified that as a committee as one of the goals we want to learn about. There are unique challenges with mobile home parks and the structural inequities for the owners and renters in those parks. So it's great to see that you're getting into that. And I've often thought that OAR, when OAR built Endeavor House, Deb Dietrich just took a leap. She wasn't a housing developer, she wasn't a contractor, but she knew what she needed. So it's great to have the people who do the housing, and OAR can do the programming.
Yes, I think, I find that the most successful programs are when we let the experts be the experts. And it's worked out really, really well for us thus far.
Anything else for Johanna? Thank you so much. Keep up the great work.
Thank you so much.
All right, good to have you. And we have Keith McCafferty from Law New York, continuing on the theme of housing. Welcome, Keith.
Thank you, Martha. Good morning, everybody. And talking about housing, I just want to start by saying how exciting it is to hear about all the work that INHS is doing. So many great projects that will help relieve some of the stress that our clients are seeing. The lack of affordable housing and lack of shelter for folks who need emergency housing are really two critical issues that we see through the clients that are contacting us every day. So it's great to hear that those projects are on the move. And there are so many of them. And then I want to thank you for having us here today, and I'm happy to talk about sort of the current state of housing and evictions as we're seeing them from a legal perspective. And I want to thank you for your continued support for Law New York and for the work that we do. We're in a bit of a transition right now, which is why I'm not there in person. We are in the process of onboarding 4 new staff, 3 of whom just started last Friday, 1 who's going to be starting in about a week. And also, if folks don't know, Greg Thomas, who's been the managing attorney of this office for the last 45 years, is retiring. And July 31st is going to be Greg's last day. So we're sort of transitioning him out also as we bring new folks in. So we're in the midst of training a bunch of new folks this morning. We had a few paralegals leave. 2 of them left to go off to law school, which is a wonderful thing always when we have staff who decide to make the commitment to have a career in the law that way. We had 1 person, a paralegal, move back to Texas to be closer to her family, to her parents, and 1 paralegal who left for health reasons. So just sort of the kind of natural turnover over time. But we have some great folks that we've added that we're getting up to speed, which is going to be exciting. And one of the projects we have is the early intervention homeless program that's supported by the county. And we've had some turnover in that position. So as we did the hiring this time, we decided to restructure that a little bit. And rather than have it just centered on 1 person, with the risk that perhaps they leave. We have 2 new paralegals, and we're going to split that work between the 2 of them so that they can, both be involved in that work and be able to kind of share clients, share the work, and then there'll be less of a turnover issue if one of them were to decide to move on. So we're excited about that. In terms of housing work, we still have the New York State eviction moratorium that is going to run through at this point August 31st. So for any tenants who have a hardship, fill out a hardship declaration form, they cannot be evicted until September 1st at least. So that's a great project, but we're also kind of bracing ourselves for what's going to happen September 1st in terms of caseloads. Are we going to see a sudden surge in eviction cases, or have some of the other programs and efforts to prevent that kind of surge had enough of a positive effect to prevent that from happening? And the biggest issue there is ERAP, or the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. So that's funding that came through the federal government. Nationally, it was $25 billion. It's being run at the federal level by the Department of Treasury. And so a lot of money has come to the state and now is being administered locally by the local Tompkins County Department of Social Services, who's contracted with 211, as you know, to do the outreach and help folks with the application process. So I heard last week that there had been 480 applications for ERAP filed in the county. I also heard last week that there have been no decisions on any of those applications issued yet. I don't know exactly why, although I have a pretty good guess that during the first 30 days that the program was opened, and it opened on June 1st, there were a set of priorities for who would be determined eligible, but the application process was open to everyone. So my guess would be that lots and lots of people applied across the state, and the state is sorting out who fits into the priority categories to make sure those decisions are acted upon first. And then they're following up probably to make sure everyone submitted the documentation that's required for the application. So hopefully we'll start seeing money rolling out very soon, and that will go a long way towards helping prevent some evictions in the fall. I've heard that most of the landlords, the bigger landlords, certainly in the area, have been very involved with ERAP, cooperating, either filing applications themselves on behalf of their tenants, or encouraging tenants to go ahead and apply and providing the information needed for those applications. When we get beyond the moratorium, if we do see an increase in evictions, the state passed the Tenant Safe Harbor Act about a year ago. That provides that anyone who had a hardship during the moratorium, so from last March up until when the governor lifted the restrictions on gatherings, if somebody fell behind in rent during that period of time and they had a hardship, a landlord could obtain a judgment against them for the back rent that was owed during that time, but could not evict them for that back rent. So to the extent we have folks who either the landlord or tenant didn't apply for ERAP and they have, or didn't qualify for whatever reason, and they have a bunch of arrears, we're going to see cases, I think, in the fall where landlords are trying to evict tenants for maybe large amounts of arrears that accrued during that time. When I say large, we're seeing clients who owe anywhere from, I think, $3,000 to $12,000 in back rent that accrued. Landlords may get very frustrated if they take those folks to court and learn that, well, you're certainly entitled to that money, but you can't evict this tenant because of that money, because they had a hardship. So we'll see if there's any fallout from that as we go forward. I wanted to mention the Skip Court project, which is now not going to happen. But just to mention it, there's a housing subcommittee of the Access to Justice Commission in the 6th Judicial District, which includes Tompkins County, and their district offices are based in Binghamton. But that group, which included a number of folks here in our local community, had been talking about ways to address access to the courts for low-income folks with housing issues, mostly around evictions and making sure folks involved in evictions, both the landlords and the tenants, had access to the information they need to handle their cases, access to, for tenants, access to resources to catch up on the rent if they needed that, and access to legal counsel through Law New York or pro bono attorneys. And the idea was to take all the town and village court eviction cases and combine them into one special court that would be administered by a county court level judge, but to hear all those cases in one location rather than have them be disparate in every town and village around the county. So the eviction and the skip court to handle all the town and village cases.
SCIP, right?
SCIP, yes.
What does that stand for? I know.
Special COVID intervention part, I think. Part meaning part of the court system.
Okay. You said that was the idea. That isn't happening though?
So it was, we had gotten to the point where we were all on board. The town and village justices had been asked to vote on it. They voted in favor of it. Everyone was on board, but then something happened at the court system in terms of personnel availability to do the administrative work to make this happen. And then the courts said, we're not going to be able to do it. So that was unfortunate. It would have been, and I still think if we can do it in the future, which is why I'm mentioning this, it would be a wonderful thing both for tenants and landlords and for the folks who represent them, because it gives you essentially one judge who becomes much more predictable in terms of what the outcome is going to be, what the issues are that judge sees as important, and the procedural way they go about handling the cases. And when things are predictable like that, then parties can much more easily come to an agreement to settle a case without the need for extended litigation, and to access the resources that might solve a lot of the problems so that an eviction gets prevented. So
is there any way we can try to push for that, or, keep that?
Well, the housing subcommittee is going to continue meeting, so we're going to be continuing to meet and talk about issues. I don't think this can move forward now, but it is happening in, so for example, in Bath, in Steuben County, and the Rochester, Geneva, sort of that corridor from north to south in the state is doing this skip court and has been doing it now for quite some time. And folks are very happy about the success that's happening. So there's hope that that could eventually spread our way or become a model for the rest of the state. So we're certainly keeping our eyes on it, and we'll continue to raise it whenever we can with the court system.
Okay, if there's any way we can nag the right people, push for that, please let us know.
I will, absolutely, certainly. In terms of the sort of the cases that we're seeing the clients contacting us, we've had a lot of questions about the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, or ERAP, including questions about whether or not to go forward with an application. And one of the issues there is part of the agreement is if you get ERAP, the landlord gets paid all the rental arrears that may have accrued during COVID. The tenant's all caught up. The landlord needs to agree that they will keep that tenant on for an additional 12 months at the same rent, so they can't increase the rent. They can evict that tenant if the tenant doesn't pay the rent, or the tenant violates the lease, or is engaging in behavior that's not appropriate. So it's not, it doesn't prevent an eviction or a landlord from doing what they need to do which some landlords had misconceptions about. But for some tenants who have been battling with their landlord for a while to get things repaired, those tenants have been hesitant to say, yes, state agency, go ahead and give my landlord all the money, because any leverage they have to try to get those conditions repaired may go away. So we've counseled tenants about maybe how to address that best, and how to work on those issues going forward. We've also had landlords, or tenants are contacting us, but with questions about landlords, because the landlord really wants to increase the rent, and will be prevented from doing so for a year if they accept this ERAP money. So some landlords are considering essentially waiving the arrears if the tenant will just leave, so they can increase the rent by a significant amount in this rental market. And these are cases primarily within the city of Ithaca. So some of the landlords really are looking at a big rent increase as being more important to them than maybe collecting some of these arrears. They want to get somebody else in who can pay a higher rent. Then outside of the ERAP area, we continue to see people who are being threatened with an illegal eviction or being locked out of their apartments by landlords who are frustrated with the moratorium or frustrated with the court system being kind of shut down now.
All right, if we can move any other major topics, because we want to keep moving along and want to give a little time for questions too.
Right, I'm at the point now where feel free to ask me questions.
Okay, thanks, Keith. Any questions? John?
Keith, I was wondering, I know that previously there had been a question about the salary of the paralegals not really being at the rate that some of our community paralegals were at. Was that salary increased so that you're able to retain good staff?
So salaries, our Law New York has 7 offices. The headquarters are in Geneva. And so there's a salary scale that is set for the entire organization, including our office in Rochester. There has not been, so if we increase the salary for paralegals, it has to be increased across the whole organization. And I think our executive director would say we don't have the funding or enough revenue to do that on a regional basis at this time. So we were not able to increase the funding for these Ithaca positions. I mean, increase the salary level.
Okay, that seems unfortunate considering that you could probably get a 1-bedroom apartment in Geneva for around $500, and here it's 4 times that.
Exactly. I worked in the Geneva office for about 25 years. I'm continually shocked about the difference. I mean, it's 2 or 3 times the cost of living in terms of rent here.
Yep, that's why we're here.
Thank you.
Right.
Annie?
Thank you. So you had talking about the eviction moratorium ending August 31st, and then you also, Keith mentioned your staff turnover with trying to hire and train, get up to speed 4 new staff. So I'm just wondering, do you anticipate your staff will be, you'll be fully staffed and ready, seeing that there might be, a lot of folks coming to you in end of August or before, or early September?
Yes, absolutely. In terms of the attorney staff who handle housing cases, there hasn't been that turnover there. This is the paralegals. And yes, they're going to be ready. They'll be ready to go even before then. But those folks are more focused on preventing cases from getting to the court stage, working things out with landlords, social services, community agencies to prevent an eviction case from even starting. And that's the work in the midst of the moratorium. That's the work everybody's really doing right now. But the paralegals will stay in that mode as the attorneys shift into more of a going back to court kind of mode.
Well, good luck through this period, and thank you for helping as many people as you can.
Thank you, thank you.
So Greg Thomas has only been there 45 years.
Yes, we have this quick turnover of staff.
Who's going to be the next executive director? I totally missed this.
We don't have somebody identified yet, but I expect we will hear that within the next 10 days.
Okay. All right, thanks. Henry.
Yes, thank you, Keith, for the presentation. Isn't the Human Services Coalition also doing something with representation in terms of evictions?
The Human Services Coalition has a landlord liaison person and two people who are sort of like resource folks who will be like navigators for folks. So in Ithaca City Court, when an eviction case is scheduled, it's first scheduled with the court attorney, Lisa Smith, who does kind of a settlement conference. And so the folks from the Human Services Coalition will be there, not to represent the tenant, and they're not attorneys, but to be a resource expert in terms of what's available in the community, in terms of alternative housing, or if that's going to be necessary, or resources to help somebody catch up on the rent if that's going to solve the problem. So that's the role that they're playing there. And then we're going to try to represent as many folks as we can.
Thank you.
I'll mention, Henry, on that point, Cornell Law School also is helping. They have a fellow who's going to be starting in the fall, who's going to be available as a resource with their hotline that they run, their tenant hotline, but also a resource to be able to take some cases and help us in our efforts to recruit attorneys who might handle some cases on a pro bono basis for tenants. So that's a great partnership we have launched.
Thank you.
Anything else for Keith? Thanks very much for being here, Keith. It's really, it's great to know that there's kind of no wrong door. Everybody's, wherever clients show up, they're getting the news about ERAP, they're getting news about the help that is available and what their rights are. So thank you very much for working with our other agencies on that.
Thanks so much for having me. Have a good day, everybody.
All right, good luck. All right, we're going to pick up a little time here because I don't have that much on my report, but I will tell you that it looks like we have consensus to reschedule our November and December meetings, unless you really want to meet on Thanksgiving and like Christmas, December 24th. So third Wednesday in November and December, that's November 17th and December 15th at 9:30. So all set with that, Kathy? Those dates are good. All right. Thank you very, very much for people responding to our message about that. I wanted to just walking into the building. Sean and I were talking about the next step in the American Rescue Plan decisions or fund balance decisions that we're making, and there was discussion about a working group of people, a couple of legislators to figure out what's the right process, and that hasn't been set up yet, but I hope I can be involved in that. I think I did take the city's application, and in the idea of trying to make things as simple as possible so that people could apply, to the city and then apply to us, I thought, well, let me try to modify the application. So I did work on that, but it's premature to roll that out. But I think that's the kind of thing that I would like us to be really looking at, so that we actually get specific proposals from INHS, Daycare Council, Child Development Council, et cetera. So, I think we will be looking at that and, bring something to this committee as soon as possible. So, I wanted to just follow up on the childcare issue. Sue Del Hall had emailed us all the information following her presentation at the last meeting. And her last email was about the subsidies, childcare subsidies that children in Tompkins County are being able to use. recent high was 689 kids with subsidies in 2017. In 2020, that dropped to 431. That's a 37% drop in the number of families number of children who are served by our subsidies. And unfortunately, at the state level, it kind of works that you lose them if you don't use them. So there's a real concern that if we don't have the providers available who will accept those subsidies, and if parents can't find the childcare, then it's a vicious cycle. We lose that opportunity, lose those subsidies that are so important to families. So hope we can do something about that. And that's all I have. Yeah, Henry.
Can you send us a copy of the application, Tom Knight?
Sure, and, I'm happy to send the draft I worked on too, like, I changed a few categories, yeah, happy to do that, yeah. Any other questions? No, committee members, any reports on the topic here? All right, so you did make up some time, okay. Megan, come on up, Deputy Commissioner of Planning and Sustainability. And I just want to say, shout out to Susan Landfried over there. We saw her last month in the box, and there she is. You see how tall she is after the meeting. Yeah, come on to the table, Susan. And Nick, perfect timing.
Oh, am I up?
Not just yet, but come on, sit down. It's okay. Hi, Megan.
Hi, Katie sends her regrets today, and we can help you pick up a little bit more time since I think we're hearing from so many other folks today that are touching on major pieces. Like we recently dispersed the Founders Way Award. We've heard from Johanna about that. And I will just say housing is a hot topic, as we all know in our community, but I think across the country and definitely in our state. So Susan's quickly jumped into the community housing development funds. The inquiries we're receiving, as many communities are scrambling to think about how they're using their ARPA funds and providing information to some of our downstate communities that have been hit harder by people relocating and competing with their residents for housing. So apart from that, we're happy to stick around a little bit after the meeting if you'd like to meet Susan in person. It's nice to actually have those opportunities. And I will let us get on to it.
Okay, thank you, Megan. Questions for Megan? Or for Susan? All right, thank you very much. We wish Katie well and, her surgery and all of that. So thank you. Nick, you are up.
Great,
Good time.
thanks. It's a little different. Gotta get used to this again.
Yeah, I know.
I'm sorry, Nick, you're on mute.
We have.
That joke will be good for a little while. All right, so up first, I got our bi-monthly update within your packet. It's a longer one than usual, perhaps. The tourism big highlight, I think, is that our room tax came in for the second quarter here, and it actually came in above what we had budgeted, roughly 20% above what we budgeted for the second quarter of this year, which is exciting. And I think the indicator that tourism is rebounding slightly more quickly than we had anticipated. It's still down from 2019. I don't want to make it sound like we're back to where we were pre-COVID, but it's coming in a more favorably than we expected. So there's a summary in the back of the packet there. You can see the actual breakout of the numbers. I believe Rick Snyder also kind of gave an update on this a couple weeks ago when he did a financial update as well. So one thing of note in there is you'll see the breakdown by hotels versus B&Bs. And we had a really strong performance this quarter from the B&B side, the properties with 10 or fewer rooms. Roughly, I believe it was 44% of the overall tax collected in this quarter came from that sale. So that's something to to keep an eye on it here as we go forward. We're also working more closely here with the vendor we had selected for monitoring short-term rentals. This is a company called LTAS Technologies. This is part of a shared service agreement you might remember from a few months back. We got them under contract, we've done the training with them, so we understand the system, and they're still sort of refining it. But we have some, data we can share that we have, over 900 active or intermittent short-term listings in the county, and roughly a third of those are on platforms that are not Airbnb. So those are things like Flipkey or Vrbo or Booking.com. So that's really our target when we're thinking about room tax collection is, trying to find those ones that are not in compliance there, and working with finance to identify those properties and get them on registered with finance. So that's upcoming next on that topic. I'll do a separate item about the tourism program budget. I'll that's I'll let you know that the STPB voted on that in June. Also, we've been doing contract amendments following up on the vote you guys did on the 6th of this month to put some money back into the CBB, ITCAT grants, among other activities. So all those contract amendments have gone out. I believe we've actually got them all back signed now. I think we got the last one yesterday. So yeah, we're processing those, and all those organizations should be set up to start getting increased funding for the third and fourth quarters of the year. Community celebrations. It's reopened. That's the other part of that piece that was included. So we have we did a press release earlier this week to start getting the word out. We've got some traction on that. Got some early questions from folks about putting an application. So I expect that we'll have a slate of awards to bring back here in October. So that's basically it for my report. You'll see, get an updated table with allocations of funding, room tax in there. So happy to answer any questions about tourism.
Thank you very much, Nick. Great report. Henry.
Yeah, Nick, since we saw the numbers on the second quarter for the hotels and the Airbnbs, do you know whether that hotel number was limited by the number of employees, the employee shortage?
I suspect there may have been limited amounts of hotels that didn't open rooms because of lack of staff. I think the bigger issue is lack of demand. So lack of people buying rooms.
Really?
Yeah, by far, yeah. Yeah, occupancy is still down compared to 2019. Rates are roughly a quarter down from 2019. So those are bigger headwinds than lack of staff to open rooms.
I was just wondering, so this is room tax receipts.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know if you get the figures or for the delinquent.
Yeah, I don't have it at my fingertips, but we're actually catching up on that pretty well. You'll see in that room tax report, there's a line that says additional revenue. That's primarily late payments, payments that are made outside of the current quarter. And you'll see we're almost caught up to where we were for the full year of 2020, only 2 quarters into 2021. So the properties that were behind are catching up. The number of hotels that are behind on tax payment is shrinking, but there's still a few. There's it hasn't gone to zero.
Okay, so you get those figures of what it's due, and then you work with our communication with our finance department. I'm just wondering how that works.
So we don't know how much is due. That's on each hotel to determine what they calculate out based on their sales, what the occupancy tax collected was. Then some of them don't return payment, and that's how we know where the delinquencies are. So I don't have the number in my here, but it was in the report to STPB. I can pull that out later.
Okay, and it looks like for the B&Bs, that number is way up.
Yeah,
because of the rise in the 3% to 5%.
Partially, this is the first quarter that we've had the B&Bs paying at 5%, but even accounting for that, it's grown substantially. It's, if you even take that part out of the equation, the bed and breakfast side has grown by like 40% compared to the second quarter of 2019.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Megan, did you want to add something?
No, I was just going to respond to the part about, yes, the finance department does follow up with the hotels. Right.
And
Yes, I know you just launched the community celebrations, but has there been a great demand out there for community celebrations for the winter?
I mean, we've only had it open for a couple of days, so I haven't heard anybody, exactly yet. So we're still, I've gotten a couple of people that are inquiring about deadlines and how do they start an application. So still early days. We're gonna have a workshop on August 12th. So I think that'll be a better indicator of how many people are interested. And we'll just keep tracking roughly once a week to see how many people have started applications. So.
Thanks.
so if the applications come to us in October, then you're talking about winter events.
Yeah, these are, the earliest events that I think we would be able to fund would be December, January timeframe.
Jennifer, hi Jennifer Tavares, did you want to say anything? The Zoom body language, she takes her camera on, so hi.
Oh, hi. I just put my camera on because I thought we might be moving to the TPA portion sometime soon.
Okay.
So nothing.
All right, welcome and hello. And I was wondering also, I mean, that's a third of the short-term rentals, not an Airbnb, so we don't have any agreement at all with those
That's correct.
platforms on sales tax or room tax, right?
That's correct, yeah.
There's ways to go.
Yeah.
Okay. I also wanted 951 listings. That's like 3 big apartment buildings just for short-term rentals.
Yeah, if it all combined to be the biggest hotel in the county by a factor of 3.
So what we're talking about is, and this is what we're trying to get our arms around, is how many of those units are actually pulled out of the housing market? How many of those are somebody renting for 2 weekends, graduation or reunion, or how many are those housing units that just can't be for long term?
Yeah, we've asked the vendor for some ideas on processes that other municipalities looked into that, question, and we'll start, filling back that locally here as we can. So yeah. Go ahead. Do you want to jump in, Susan?
I don't know how to do this microphone, but. Yeah, and so there's just different ways to filter some of the information in the database that Nick has access to. And so we can do it by, available nights, how frequently are these properties listed? And so we'll be able to kind of do maybe a rough guess estimate on how many are going to be available year round versus how many are available for a couple of weeks of the year or something. And so that may give us some indication of whether it is a room and of whether they are going to be full-time listings. And we also can determine, is it a whole property that's being listed or is it a room within a property? So it'll give us a better estimation of that.
Okay, thank you very much. And I know that, several municipalities have passed, various kinds of code restrictions. I think the city is still not, right? They still haven't.
No, they haven't.
They haven't gotten there yet. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for keeping us up on that, because I think it really has a big impact on our housing shortage. Did you want to go through the tourism budget?
Sure, we can do a quick overview of that. So I just included in your packet the budget that the STPB voted to recommend at its June meeting. This is for 2022. So this has already been sort of submitted and discussed internally here.
Actually, we don't have.
You don't have this attachment? Oh, well, I will make a note to send it to you following the meeting. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. We have a list of year-to-date allocations, that's all.
That's not for 2022. So the proposal for 2022, in essence, is to follow the recommendation that was laid out in the budget retreat back in April, which was to use some either fund balance or ARP money to help bring the tourism program back up to the revenue level that was the original 2020 budget. And in doing so would allow us to bring all the programs that are funded by the tourism program, roughly back to that point in their in funding. So when I send this out, you'll see the actual numbers for that. But all the grant programs are included in there, from ACOG grants to community celebrations to other one new grant program for outdoor recreation, organization development, which is still sort of in development. The grant guidelines are still being drafted. It also allows to bring the CVB funding back up to roughly where we were in early 2020, at about $1.5 million for their budget. So this would really kind of be the first truly post-COVID budget for the tourism program. Should it go through? However, there's a lot of uncertainty still with room tax, what's going to happen in the future. In the memo you'll see some that described as a little more detail. Trying to think of what else. Other activities to be aware of in there. This will be the second year that the county pays toward the conference center to the city. So this is 4% of the overall room tax is going to be paid to the city for initially for the construction and then eventually for the operation of the conference center. And we're also proposing in the budget to continue on all the programs that have been historically funded through the tourism. This is much more of a business as usual budget than the last 2 years. So I'll circulate the PDF with you and answer any questions.
Thank you, Nick. And are we supposed to approve it?
No, we do not want an action today.
Okay.
There had been a practice where those actions were taken to this committee with this all the expanded budget committee. We'll go back through it again.
Okay.
Just want to make you aware.
Okay, great. Questions for Nick? All right, thank you. We do have a tourism related resolution. If I could get a motion back at page 9. Moved by Annie, seconded by Henry. Document 10222, designation of tourism promotion agents for state. This is boilerplate. We do this every year. Is there any, are there any questions? Anything we should know in particular? All right. Jennifer, did you want to chime in?
No, as you mentioned, we've been doing this for a very long time together. I think the big piece of information that's important for you all to understand is that this is a requirement that renders Tompkins County and the Chamber and CVB eligible to apply for and receive I Love New York grant funding each year as part of the matching funds program. So that's the big reason why we need to meet this deadline each year. And we certainly appreciate your continued support and the relationship with the county.
Absolutely. Couldn't do it without you. Thanks, Jennifer.
Absolutely.
All right. Annie.
About how much do we get each year in matching funds?
So that really varies each year. It's a very interesting, complex formula where they have us apply for way more money than they will ever award anyone. And then they settle in somewhere between $65,000 and $72,000 usually. If we look back in the recent tourism budgets, we'll see the numbers are pretty consistently in that range. Of course, the pandemic last year paused all payments from the program. And then much later in the year, the state started trickling out some of the funding and making partial payments. And we still, a good portion of this year, we've been recovering some of that awarded grant funding from the state. So this is something where, as Nick, I'm sure, has mentioned, or you likely have seen in the budget, the matching portion comes from the room tax budget each year. It's matched from the room tax program, and then the state awards. And so it's a guess. We're making a guess each year when we do the budget as to how much is the matching funds grant going to be for, and then the budget needs slight modification, plus or minus, based on the actual award.
Thank you.
Was that vague enough yet detailed enough to help you understand how it works?
Perfect. Just what I was looking for.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Jennifer. All right, ready to vote on this? All in favor, please raise your hands. Yes, thank you very much. 2 other questions, Nick. I just want, so you said about the STPB budget, that brings the budget back to 2020 amount, is that right?
The original 2020 budget level, yeah.
So for 2022,
Right.
getting back to 2020. And that feels like being whole.
It's pretty close, yeah. It's close enough for, yeah, we can work around margins where there's little differences.
Okay, great. And then I wondered, any news on the Finger Lakes Heritage Area designation?
I haven't heard much about that since our last meeting with them, so nothing new. I don't know, Jennifer, you have any updates on that?
No, I'm sorry. I haven't heard anything recently either.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Thanks, Jennifer. Good morning.
Thanks for having me.
Good morning. We have the workforce team here, Natalie, Jackie, and Rosemary. So Natalie, want to take it away for starters?
That's right. We like being referred to as team workforce. Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie Bernowski, the Executive Director of the Tompkins County Workforce Development Board. And as Martha said, to my right is Jackie Murieso, who is the Director of the Office of Employment and Training, who oversees all programs with Tompkins Workforce New York Career Center. And to her right is Rosemary Avila, who is our new, as of last week, Deputy Director of Workforce Development for the county. Now, I believe we have slides to show you that you have not seen in advance.
And we got.
Oh, do you have a copy? Wonderful.
Yeah, so people can take notes.
Yeah, great. I've just done introductions, and I'll start by saying that our presentation this morning really does represent another pivot. We've talked a lot about pivots here locally in the county. We feel that between last month and this month, we are really making a transition in terms of workforce development and how we think about our local economy and the staffing challenges that we're experiencing. We start all of our public meetings with this pie chart, just to remind all of us as partners what our local economy looks like. Now, there won't be a lot of surprises here, but we have had some pluses and minuses to the map of jobs here locally. Perhaps we won't be surprised by the right-hand side of the chart that's represented in that sort of sage green color. That's our eds and meds economy. Those are those education and healthcare jobs. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean all of the jobs at, for example, TC3 or Ithaca College, but those are jobs that are in those occupations that represent education and health. On the left-hand side of the chart, we're looking at those many varied colors that represent the other local industries in our economy that are just as important. And the one thing that I like to emphasize about this, all of these pieces of the pie, is that this is a representation of jobs. This is not necessarily a representation of the income attached to those jobs. That would be a different pie chart. So these are positions that are both filled and unfilled. These are jobs in our economy. So the next slide, please. Here's some good news to share. This is where we rank in terms of our local unemployment rate here in Tompkins County. This is the unemployment rate, that 4.3%. Is the Ithaca Metropolitan Statistical Area, referred to as the MSA, which is essentially Tompkins County. This is good news for us, particularly when you look at how we compare to other counties in the state, how we compare to the state's unemployment rate, and how we look in comparison to the rest of the United States. What we want to emphasize here, and Jackie and Rosemary and I talk about this all the time, is understanding what exactly is behind that 4.3%. We'll say a little bit more about that in the next slides, please. Before we get there, though, I want to show you something that is happening in our local jobs market. This is a representation over the past decade of the decrease in workers available. for those positions that I showed you in the pie chart. There's a lot happening with these numbers. If you look at just now, 2021, that represents our June numbers. And these are numbers in thousands in terms of people who are available for employment. There's a lot happening here, a combination of some people working age retiring, not enough people moving into the county to staff those jobs and be placed in those jobs, and lots of other life changes in between and challenges in between. Jackie and I are both nodding with this.
Now, is this people, workers who live in Tompkins County?
This is workers who live in Tompkins County and are available for work. Yeah. And this is a concern because, you know, we're seeing a 10,000 person difference. And we hear this in real terms on a daily basis from many of our local businesses. And that's businesses, social enterprises, and nonprofits. This hasn't gotten any better as a result of COVID year 2020. And we'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a minute. Next slide, please. So there are several key points here. The first to mention is that although we have this quite impressive unemployment rate of 4.3%, there's still a lot happening behind that number. We know that we have many people here in the county who either aren't connected to a job, aren't receiving benefits, and aren't in some kind of training program. And if we truly want to be a local inclusive economy, we need to find a way to reach those individuals. And we make an effort at this every day on a, I would say, a minute-by-minute basis, don't we, Jackie? The other things to remember is that, and something that Joanna mentioned in the first presentation this morning, that a low unemployment rate can very possibly, and is very possibly leading us into inflation. This is not an easy message to deliver here this morning, but we are seeing the numbers. We're listening very closely to the national messages. All of the top economists are saying this, that we can expect both cost inflation and wage inflation to last 18 months to 2 years into the future. We're hearing this. I heard Joanna mention a 25% increase in some local project costs. That's real. Now, we're not saying that those adjustments are necessarily going to be short-term. We're not necessarily saying that all of those adjustments are a bad thing. And so we are listening very closely. We are taking on the narrative from all of our local employers and understanding what that means in terms of a combination of wages rising to attract workers, some of the incentives and bonuses that are in place, particularly for hiring, and some of the other financial challenges that are happening in our local jobs market. The other thing that we want to say is that one of our main messages is that as a local workforce development system, that includes our career center, all of our federally and state funded workforce development and training programs, and even beyond. We're talking about TC3, we're talking about a workforce program delivered by the Tompkins Chamber. We're talking about all of those transitional employment programs that our wonderful community nonprofits have in place as well. That's how we think of our workforce development system, and we are all working very, very differently. So one of the messages that we wanted to make sure we deliver this morning is that workforce development as a system is very much an investment in our economy. And you all have heard me say before, we benefit from a very close working relationship with IAED, and we make sure that we understand all of those business needs every day. Next slide. We are also very fortunate here at Workforce Development to have had a piece of research done for us throughout the pandemic months. which very much looks into the future and gives us a crystal ball, particularly for the rest of 2021 and 2022. Here in Tompkins County, we agreed as a workforce development system with the researchers that the time was right for a different definition of what an in-demand occupation is. And we put in place 4 criteria that we'd asked them to stick to as closely as possible. The first is that the in-demand occupations were decided upon and cross-referenced with all of the surveying and questionnaires that Jennifer at the chamber put in place throughout the COVID months. So we took all of that on board and did an additional survey of 180 local employers. In addition to that, we asked about the expected unfilled skills needs that were taking place with those employers and were expected throughout 2022. When we decided on an early list of in-demand occupations, we also asked that those occupations be considered within the terms of our living wage definition here at Tompkins County, which has been decided by Alternatives Credit Union. And we also wanted a list that was not expected to be further affected by a pandemic. We in workforce development have never had to consider something like this before, but we thought that this might be a smart move. And so we have a new in-demand occupation list, which we're happy to share with you. We also thought that there was great importance at looking at occupations that could start with a high school diploma, start with a 2-year degree, and start with a 4-year degree. The reason we went through that process was because we are very much having conversations with economic development about how we retain people with 4-year degrees here in Tompkins County. That's not a talent attraction strategy, that's a talent retention strategy. So we want you to go to school here, be educated here, be trained here, and stay here. Next slide, please.
We have 5 minutes for presentation, then 5 minutes for questions.
So I'll turn that over to
Okay.
Steph.
Okay, all right. So I actually have the next 3 slides and I won't cover everything in 5 minutes, so I'll zip through as quickly as I can. And thank you for the opportunity to just reflect on some of the challenges that we're observing at the Career Center. So systemic barriers pre-pandemic versus now, things that we often saw people coming in the doors of the Career Center with, transportation barriers, access to technology skills, childcare, access to living wage jobs, training and education, certainly a whole slew of other things, but these things have only been, of course, exacerbated by the pandemic. And we are continuing to see that because so many of the resources, so many of the organizations that people have typically tapped into for the supports that they need continue to be in some way or form, their operations are scaled back significantly or people's ability to access them are very different, and in most cases virtual. And that is the same case for the Career Center. So as a requirement of New York State Department of Labor, our physical office remains closed to the public at this time, which means that we are providing services in a hybrid model at this time. It means the Department of Labor side of our staff are doing everything virtually. So by phone, by Zoom, and by email. The Office of Employment and Training staff is a little bit different. We do have boots on the ground. We have staff who are working in the public, in the field, mostly on our youth side right now. So we have at this current time, about 83 youth locally who are in through our summer youth employment program and our year-round youth employment program. And that means that our staff are on the ground with them, which is wonderful. And we've been able to navigate that despite our doors being closed. On the adult side of our programs, however, our services remain virtual. And so what that means are things like paperwork processes, requirements that we have in order to continue to operate our training programs. People have to navigate those processes with us. So it means people have to figure out Zoom. It means that people have to maybe mail in proof of documentation, or they may have to take screenshots on phones. And this also means that in fact, there are some people being left out of that picture, right? So people who don't have the technology skills, who don't have technology equipment,
are being left out of that picture. So what we're really seeing is people being further marginalized, and I'm certain this is not news to all of you, but it's certainly something we're seeing in the Career Center. Next slide, please. So practical solutions that we have underway, meet the employer sessions, we're doing these virtually, so providing opportunities for employers to let folks in the community know what their needs are on the employment end of things, what jobs are available, skills, education, experience they're looking for, and in turn, job seekers have an opportunity to meet with them virtually and to make connections, since we can't do that in a physical location at this time. We are funding classroom, online, and hybrid training, including on-the-job training at this time. We just resumed this about early March. For the Career Center. So these things were put on hold because we simply could not facilitate the programs. Our staff was really all hands on deck providing support for the unemployment insurance claims needs. It was such an urgent situation throughout the pandemic. I'm sure, again, you all know that folks just being able to access the benefits that they were eligible for was a huge issue. The system was not prepared to handle, it's kind of a broken system, not prepared to handle people's needs. So we have found ourselves now finally shifting back to our regular services, but of course in a different way of delivering those. We are really making strong efforts to partner with businesses, particularly through our youth program, because we work with so many nonprofits, for-profits, and government entities to provide work experiences for our youth and for some of our adult population. So we're being very intentional about working with marginalized populations and ensuring that people have access to the benefits of these programs. So what does that look like? It means we're intentionally partnering with businesses that are owned by BIPOC individuals, LGBT community, women, individuals with disabilities, and really trying to be mindful of these approaches. Ensuring access to employment and training. So what that looks like is, scheduling appointments in a side conference room that isn't directly tied to the Career Center, but so that we can ensure that people are able to tap into services if they don't have the technology skills, if they don't have internet access, or otherwise are limited. Other kinds of inclusive things that we're doing, just really being mindful of what the language looks like in our forms. So changing things, providing expanded options for gender identification, including pronouns, including preferred names. So we have several youth in our youth program that are in the process of transitioning gender-wise, and these things make a difference. So if you fill out an application and you see male and female as the only options for gender, that's excluding someone. And so we're being really intentional about the language that we include in all of our forms. This includes other things like reaching out to the state and navigating forms that have been in the past told that cannot be, that the language on them cannot be changed. And so together, we're working together with the state to make changes so that things, when an individual with a disability has to answer a question about their disability, they are able to do it in a way that hopefully feels comfortable and inclusive to them and is not further marginalizing them. Another thing that we're doing with our youth programs is we facilitate a weekly workshop. This is all done virtually, both with our year-round program, and now we have our summer youth program also attending and participating in this weekly workshop. Youth are incentivized, so they are given gift cards to attend these workshops. We're helping them to build employment skills, but also life skills. We start every session with opportunities for the youth to actually introduce themselves, talk about their jobs, so they have public speaking skills that they're developing. And then we also do mindfulness activities every single time. So we're practicing mindfulness and meditation skills, but really helping young people develop the skills that they need and also learn to cope through the challenges of the pandemic. I can tell you something that has changed for us is in the past, we often saw youth flow into and out of our program. So they might come on board for a month and drop out because a lot of the barriers were so significant that they didn't have the support networks in place. And what we're finding just with this weekly workshop that we're doing is really a sense of community being built, and we're keeping youth in the program. We don't have any youth drop out of the program unless it's to pursue post-secondary education or another training program, or because they've been hired for unsubsidized employment. So we're seeing great success on that front.
Jackie, I'm gonna really be bossy here.
Okay.
Ask you to slide ahead to Workforce American Rescue Plan funds. I think we wanna make sure we get there.
No, yes.
I just, tons of questions. But I wanna-
Okay, sure. Yep, I understand.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead. So next slide. Thank you, Kathy.
Sure. You know, we put this slide in late yesterday, which is why we're really getting the presentation this morning. And one of the reasons for that is because we weren't entirely certain of the process. But we
Either
so, you know, this is our soft request. We would absolutely welcome the opportunity to put forward a request for ARPA funds. Our case for that is that workforce development is very much economic development, and human capital is capital. And we are very fortunate, as I said earlier, here in Tompkins County to have the research to back this up. We know the changes that happened to our local labor market throughout the pandemic. And Jackie and I are very much in agreement with this, that in order to achieve the recommendations in these two reports, this is both the Green Workforce Report and the New Possible, we need a skilled workforce that is technologically ready to enter these jobs. We believe here locally that in 1 year of COVID, we have advanced 10 years technology. And we feel that in order to be an inclusive economy and be able to start really measuring very closely job placement, retention, and advancement requires the technological skills that we don't necessarily have in place at the moment. So our request is a combination of funds that would go toward both some kind of digital device and training combined. We see that as a capital investment. Let me tell you what this looks like in real life. So we love construction jobs here at Workforce Development. Construction jobs are a really good thing. And we know that, you know, the day's list of tasks are read on an iPhone. We know that supplies are reordered using a tablet. We know increasingly with our manufacturing jobs, with our hotel and hospitality jobs, that those digital skills are absolutely essential. And so we would see what I hope that Mike is going to ask me, ballpark figure. We would suggest,
Good question.
yeah, we would suggest a $500,000 investment in our local workforce as part of those ARPA funds. I also wanted to say,
What now is that, so on the slide, is that a laptop for every worker? You mean for the job seekers who come in? Is that what you're saying? Or
yes, and potentially beyond. So if I may use an old time quote, we were thinking of a chicken in every pot. And this is the moment for some kind of digital device and accompanying training for every worker in Tompkins County. We know that this is a business-friendly proposal as well, and particularly given our skills shortage and now our people shortage, we think that this is essential for making a good match for those positions. And if you don't mind, I'd like to turn things over to Rosemary, who wanted to say a few things about how we're going to start measuring race, equity, and inclusion.
Thank you, Natalie. Good morning. First of all, I'm honored to be here, and I look forward to working on behalf of the Workforce Development Board with Tompkins County leaders to better serve our community, our businesses, and our residents. So we are in the early stages of creating strategies to measure inclusion, race, and equity in workforce development programs. And that's something that we're trying to look at businesses from every sector and trying to gather data that is out there, but also trying to use other resources to come up with it. So that's something that's in the works, and we hope to share with you sometime soon.
Great, I think that's a huge focus that we really want to pay attention to. Are we reaching the people? And I noted the workforce participation rate going down. That's like, no, we need to really make that.
This is something that I think that we need to communicate about much more as local partners and as a community. Our workforce participation rate hovers between 54 and 56%. That is very far away from full employment. And very much below the national, the average for New York State, which is higher into the 60s. There are lots of reasons why people aren't attached to the economy. I think we need to understand that a little bit better. And we also want to get the message out, and we talk about this all the time with our businesses and our customers at the Career Center. There's a job for you. There's a job for you here in Tompkins County, and we're here to help you get there.
Thank you. Questions, comments from the committee? Annie?
Yeah, seeing people here. I look up. So thank you for all this information, updates, and welcome Rosemary to the great workforce. Is it team workforce? A workforce team.
Yeah, team workforce.
Team
Like that.
workforce.
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't know if you'll get hats or badges or
T-shirts, maybe.
T-shirts. I have a lot of questions, but I'm just going to try and pare it down to just one or two. First, a comment. So glad to hear the focus on equity and inclusion. As you know, that's really important to the county as a whole, the legislators. So one question. One more comment on that. I had a constituent reach out and say that as a, I don't think what they call, there's a term for it, but coming to this area as the spouse, is it called trailing spouse? I don't know, it's not the best word, but coming as a spouse of somebody working for one of the educational institutes, saying how hard it was to find a job. And a lot of them, and connecting with other people that are in that same situation that a lot of them give up. And so this person, they actually are moving because they couldn't stay here and afford to live here, and they have one child with only one spouse working. So I just wanted to pass that on to you guys. I'm sure you hear that, but I just told them, they were like, can you tell somebody? And I'm sure it's there, but I wanted to make sure I said that out loud. And so there's people were losing, have hardships. So one question is hooking up, and I know you're brand new, but just hooking up with our Chief Equity and Diversity Officer with Dan Carithers. Is that something you guys have done or are going to be doing?
Yes, that is the plan. We are currently in the process of mapping out every training program within Tompkins County. That's our first step. And then we're going to get on the phone and start talking to people about what actually does your participation look like? How are you getting into the neighborhoods that have highest unemployment or have highest attachment from the economy? What are your outreach methods? And can we start to measure those things? We think the answer is yes. This is new territory. This is a new approach for workforce development programs as a system in a local area. So we're not just, if you like, answering programs, we're looking at our system as a collection of entry points. And then we're going to be looking farther down the line at employment placement, retention, and advancement. So that's whether or not when you enter a training program, how we can help you think 2 years in advance. That's the plan. And Jackie.
Yeah, I'll just add to that just a little bit more in terms of on the ground. So I am actually a chair of the Access and Equity Committee on the JEDI team. So one of our efforts that we're involved in right now is actually doing kind of an overhaul of forms and procedures county-wide. So something that we'll be tackling with department heads, county administration, and Deanna, of course, is on board with us to help ensure that our forms and our procedures countywide actually reflect the changes that we're wanting to make in terms of language, access, inclusivity. You know, I think that just gives you a little bit more on the ground versus big picture.
And together we're calling this a systemic approach. So we're looking beyond programs.
Is anything, you know, when you're talking, as far as I'm concerned, you know, for the green economy, you know, more inclusion, equity, and, you know, if there's anything else you can think of to help with that when you're coming back and asking for funds, they'll have more likely have my support. So thank you.
Thanks for that.
Final questions, because we have to move on. Henry.
Okay, one quick question. On your fewer workers chart, you have that 2021 is 47.6 thousands workers, but 2020 at 47.4. I mean, everyone talks about the lack of workers, but you actually have it showing going up this year. Can you explain that?
Well, when we get into decimal points, Henry, he always asks me a question about math. You know, we're talking about maybe 100 to 150 people in that decimal point. I don't know that our local businesses would notice the difference. And that's the real thing. You know, why those numbers are important is because that allows our local economy to grow. You know, the economy is people. And the real message that we hear on an hourly basis, maybe a minute by minute basis even, is that our local businesses of all kinds need workers. And so the point of the additional rows on that chart is that we need to do more to keep and attract workers here to the county. And we need to do more to reach the ones who are already here, who aren't attached to the jobs market.
One quick question, then we got to get to the resolution, and then Jen Gregory is waiting for us. But this table doesn't include in commuters. So, I mean, are we seeing? We know that's where our workforce watershed that's, you know, especially includes the surrounding counties.
No, I agree. The local labor markets don't recognize county boundaries, right? And so the jobs market is bigger than Tompkins County. And so that's right. That's not what that table shows at the moment. However, we have had an amount of statistical work done in the new possible that tells us about that. I do think that there's a strong case, particularly as we continue to emerge from the pandemic and as we demonstrate a high vaccination rate, so to look beyond Tompkins County and research those numbers more closely within the southern tier.
Okay, so I think there's a strong interaction with the housing crisis that we see people who, I mean, I think the director of INHS lives in another county because she couldn't afford to live here. Yeah. So, I think we have to pay attention to that. And speaking of advertising, you know, vaccination rates, I was going to say, Nick, I think the SDPB should have an advertising campaign about our vaccination rate. Thank you. We're here, we're safe. You don't need a mask. No, you might need a mask. I'm sorry. Okay, thank you so much. We could spend all meeting with all of you, and we really appreciate meeting in person. Rosemary, thanks for coming. And we will stay in touch. Okay. Oh, resolution. Yes. Somebody want to move document 10277. Moved by Andy. Seconded by.
We do have a quick slide. I don't know if the presentation is still up. I just wanted to show you the amount and the wonderful collaboration of funders who've stepped in.
Seconded by Henry. In our packet, the last one.
Very last one. Yep.
No, this is great. $85,000 from the Park Foundation linked.
Yes.
Okay.
Very quickly, as with many of our programs, we saw a reduction in funding this year for our summer youth employment program. We received what can only be called a surprise gift from this collaboration of charitable organizations here locally. This has already had an impact. We've been able to serve 50 additional young people and place them in employment this year, which is good news for everybody. Everyone wins with this one.
Great. All right, we're ready to vote.
Was there a motion?
Yeah, Annie and Henry seconded. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you all so much for your work. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, Jen, and you know, come on up. Jen, where would you like me? Okay, where would you like? Great. Jen is not fast, so we're glad to have you, Jen. You know everybody here?
No, I don't think I do. I'm Jen Gregory from Southern Tier Regional Board. Henry is on our board.
Yeah, Koreman.
Thank you.
County Ulysses.
Thank you.
You know, and Teresa always a fan of ours from the public. And we got
Okay,
Kathy- Kathy Covert.
Mike Sigler, Town of Lansing.
Thank you.
Shona Black, Tompkins.
Yep, okay, awesome, thank you. Yeah, so I wanted to, on the screen, Michelle, who does she represent?
Oh, Michelle's one of our clerks.
Okay,
Deputy clerk.
okay, very good. Thanks for taking the time, everyone, today. I wanted to give an update and talk about our restructuring and reiterate what Natalie was saying. These stats are so odd to me. We have the lowest, and I just want to share with you that that's consistent across the region, what she expressed. We've never had this low unemployment rate while I've been working in my career. How about that? That's a weird thought. But also what I found in mind, because Appalachian Regional Commission did a study a few years ago, New York State a few years ago, you know, their employment, their growth has been close to 10%. We've been -4. That's in line with Kentucky, who just lost their full impact. So in talking with the ARC, I'm still looking at that. That's our manufacturing decline that still resonates across the entire southern tier. So all the way from Allegheny County, you're in the center here over to Schoharie. Something to keep in mind, and I can certainly share those stats if you need. But I've also been looking this week at DOL. One of the things we do for our organization is funding, planning, and networking. Oh, did you text me, please? I'll let it pass those around to highlight just some of the items I wanted to mention. So for reminder, so the 8 for Southern Tier 8 stands for 8 counties that we serve in the Appalachian Regional Commission and Economic Development Administration, where your local pathway to those funding sources. So funding, grant writing, and networking are what we're working on. I've been with the organizations for since 2005, developed the GIS there and came into this position in 2017. So really restructuring the organization quite a bit. Some of the recent investments that you'll know, one you're going to hear about probably next week that has something to do with broadband. So that's really exciting. So that will make it
a teaser, you know.
Oh, it is. It is. I'm sorry. It's just a teaser. Those federal congressional representatives that we have will be mad at me if I spoil it for them.
Okay.
But so that's exciting. Ithaca area economic development, they receive funding for broadband infrastructure to get the Southern Tier network expanded up to the coal plant. Alternatives Credit Union, they have a grant program currently underway to help small businesses with their financing and training. That's exciting. Groundswell, they've had a couple grant opportunities that have been very successful for them. As well as larger regional projects. And this workforce issue is really, we just submitted a $1 million proposal yesterday
I would have more staff with me, but they didn't sleep for 3 days. Because that's one of the biggest issues we have. Granted, broadband, of course, with the pandemic reminded everyone of how critical that is. So we can't get away from that infrastructure issue, but this workforce thing has me concerned as well. So funding through ARC, funding through EDA. On the second page, there gives you an example of some of the summary of the investment projects that we have and the dollar amount and the return. So for every dollar that Tompkins is paid in dues of $10,000, for every dollar, you receive $5,000 back in funding for the county. That doesn't include that total, the additional planning work that we're working on. So broadband, Nick is here in the planning team, and we spent this morning with Katie talking about the broadband, the Fujitsu study that you've had. We still have those gaps. There are some funding opportunities out there now, so we want to see if we can maximize those. It's tough because, you know, there aren't a lot of homes and they're all spread out. And this grab from the private sector, there are just pockets left. So we're going to see if we can make sense out of any of it, encourage STN to expand, and the internet service providers that have been part of this, if they can pick up a few more homes. I have links on here, and please let me know, Martha, if you would like a digital of this. Most of these are available on our website, but I'm happy to share that for quick reference. The energy infrastructure assessment that we looked at as well, you know, how, what do we have here as well for build outs, especially with tying into the new energy platform that we're going in with the state with solar and wind. A lot of that, we're missing out on the opportunity for that infrastructure because it's going to be along the thruway cities and downstate. So I've been trying to encourage Empire State Development to say, okay, how do we play in this game in our region? And the hope is through the supply chain, because we still do have some manufacturing in the area. So a recent report that we just loaded on our site that's kind of cool to see in a good map is from Tier Energy Network, to show all the clean energy companies that are participating in that supply chain and those initiatives forward. I think well, we know there's some real potential opportunity here, especially with Imperium 3, even though that plant will be opening in Endicott. You have several suppliers in Tompkins County to support that initiative. So that's really exciting. At the same time I'm saying that, I'm concerned who's going to work at these sites and fill those seats. So that's why we're begging for new training programs for the WIPs for that. Our Opportunity Zone portfolio launched. We have not had any press on that yet, to give all of the economic developers across the 8 counties an opportunity to check out all the projects. The idea with that was that Empire State Development assigned the locations for the opportunity zones where private sector business could get a discount on their taxes making that investment. And when the state made their platform budget, they have a state map with all of the opportunity zones in it. Well, that's really difficult for any of our 1 or 2 opportunity zones to compete with New York State. So last year, I brought in this group from Cleveland called the Opportunity Exchange, who they work with communities across the country to develop a portfolio. So in all of 8 counties, we've said, okay, what investment projects do we have in these areas? And now we have something. We have 19 different areas with 42 projects for investment. That just launched 2 weeks ago, and we will have announcements pending probably in August or September for that to showcase. So that's really exciting to see, and it's been great to work with all the economic developers and planners across the area. That's there, and if you have ideas for that and different projects you'd like to have on that, please let us know. Substance use disorder workforce, because our rate is so low. How do we help the folks that have been out of work for a while and aligning training programs, what they can participate in, getting the businesses ready so they understand these are folks in recovery. They've dealt with these issues. They're a superior workforce. They just need an upskill to get back into it. Also providing help for our groups like the council that have peer counselors that have really been tapped out with this COVID pandemic. I'm concerned with all of them too. I'm seeing the burnout rate with our folks. So part of this program is encouraging additional peer counselors to step up and provide the training for them because they really need it. And then our water quality program. This is mostly in the Binghamton MS4, but we're welcome to help out with Ithaca too as needs are. The Industry Summit platform, we also dealt with networking. Of course, last year that was a big disappointment, and I'm a little hesitant to schedule another very soon because our facilities are not staffed yet. I'm really, really struggling with that one. I'd love to have another event with advanced manufacturing in September, but I don't know if I'm comfortable yet. I might try to gamble with the snow and lean more towards November. So that's something we're looking at as well. And there are other opportunities we've had several SUV workforce programs on that. And one benefit of the pandemic is they're recorded live. So if you sign in and join, you can watch those recorded sessions.
SUV?
Yes.
What was that?
Oh, sorry, substance use disorder.
Oh, SUD. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. I thought you said SUVs.
Oh, sorry. No, I don't have any.
If they're electric,
You did see on our website, the DEC, in addition to what NYSERDA has, DEC has a program if you're upgrading your fleet or infrastructure, there's a reimbursement program out. I would imagine you're participating with Brown Cooperative Extension on that.
Our planning department's up on this.
Oh, great. There's a lot of work involved there as well. And you guys, this county leads a lot of that anyway, so you're usually in good shape than the other 8. So that's a little bit about where our current programs have been. So I came in 2017, restructured the organization a little bit, have new staff, but one thing that I did not address was the due structure for this organization.
Before you go there, so I'm looking at the top of page 2. So county investment means from the 3 years, 2018 to 2020, we have paid $10,000 in dues for 3 years. And ARC and EDA investments, this is 1.6+ million come to Tompkins County. Okay, and that return on investment, 1 to 54. Great. Okay, now you can talk about.
Okay, great.
That's the last page here.
Thank you, Martha. I'm just gonna skim right over that. And I think for me, it's very exciting to see all these investments. So I hope that you're thrilled as well. Our dues have not been raised since before I was born. So, and I know this. So we're civil service, much like the county employees are. And we have a system where I can, our staff, I can move up, but I don't have that budget to pay them yet. And I said, okay, we have to do something here. So our finance committee brought this up as well. So I'm looking for a moderate increase. If you looked at dues in 1968 of 10 grand, that would be $48,000 in today's funds. I'm not looking for that. Over 3 years from 2021, next year, 2022 to 2023, to raising them across the board from 10,000 to 16,000. That's what I'm looking for. I've been with the other counties as well. I can share that we looked at population base in this. Broome and Ithaca are our largest population centers. But when you look at that, you also have the capacity to do more because you have that staff. What I found is a lot of our dollars go to the more rural communities and a lot of our time spent on staff because they don't have the capacity to push forward these initiatives. So I didn't feel that was a fair justification at all. And then when we looked at the return, it's across the board and it also depends how much the community is engaged and at that local leadership, what they're applying for. So for me, the most equitable pathway was a flat raise across the board. So that's the board. They have a draft resolution that they put forward and they're hoping that, and I'm hoping that you would consider this for the next few years for your budgets.
So the way this would work is that you're in touch with Katie Borgella, who proposes the planning budget. And so that would be something that and she proposed the 3-year, $10,000 dues allocation, 4 years ago, so that then that's something that we consider. Go ahead, Mary.
Right, so this has been folded into our department's budget as opposed to county administration. So we've been doing that through an over target request. So you would see that proposed dues increase and then OTR for this year's budget and then going forward each year.
So at this point, Katie's on board, supportive of this. And I know the reason we did it as kind of a 3-year trial period was we really weren't sure. I mean, in the past, we're so glad that you restructured and re-energized things, because now, we have come to feel that it is, and that's why Katie would be proposing rejoining. It's worth our investment and our participation and the time for people to actually go to the meetings and so it's not something we considered here. We'll be looking at it as part of the whole planning budget.
Okay. And
I love that line, not hasn't raised the dues since before you were born. That's a good one. So any questions from folks? Comments? Henry, you want to add anything as board member? No. All right, well, this is great. And I think we would love to have this online.
Great. I'll send the
digitally
digital.
so we can get, sort of wander around more of the details.
Absolutely. I'll reply, Martha, with what you sent me today.
Okay. Terrific.
Okay.
I have one quick question. Now, I should probably know this, but so our municipalities within Tompkins County, they're eligible to apply for these grants through you, right?
Yes.
So, and our county staff, planning departments reached out and talked to the municipalities about these programs or sent them information. Is that correct? There.
So, and that's a good point. So 2 things. So recently Newfield, so they were able to get funding for their study for their water line expansion.
Right.
Any of these ARP dollars that are coming in, if you're working on a project, apply for ARC next year because you already have the match with this. So you can leverage what you're already investing in.
So you're saying ARC funding usually requires a match.
Yes.
And you're saying ARPA could be used.
Right, if those are considered local dollars and you have specific projects that you're investing in, call us and say, oh, would this match? Like, if you decide to go, because, what we've seen, right, is that with ARP, we didn't know what you would be eligible for. Now there's a specific target of, well, these are eligible expenses more than others. So that goes for the municipalities as well as the county. We do have some counties that are pursuing broadband build-outs with those dollars. And the other 2 that I'm thinking about of online industry summit is the decision to make to opt in or out of cannabis for the municipalities, having another training for those. The counties, some of them are set up different. The Board of Supervisors serve instead of the legislature. So they've asked me, are you doing anything with that? I had one training where I brought in Julie Dossel from LEAF and at SEGO to talk about the science of addiction, but she's really looked at the law for that. And she would be a good resource. So if you're interested in that sort of training, I'm thinking about putting another one together.
I think at some point, we seem to have heard so little about it from New York State, so
little. And the economic development teams are working on this, but I was talking with Nick about this morning. Haven Castetter, who's a graduate of the Southern Tier Incubator there, his family has been involved with hemp, and he spoke at one of the summits. He understands those laws very well and understands some of what the economic development teams are looking at better than even what the state's putting out. There's such little education, and we're connected through the SUD program with these folks, and Julie's a tremendous asset. So I will probably set another one of those up.
I'm sure if you build it, we will come.
Okay, thank you.
All right, well, thank you so much. Appreciate your swapping out here. It's great to see you in person.
Thank you as well. It's so good to be back. So good luck with all the decisions you have to make. Enjoy the rest of your summer.
Thank you.
And we'll be working on broadband for the next month.
That's a fair thing to say, at least.
That's right, for the next 20 years.
By then, all those chips that we got in our heads because we got vaccinated, those will be working. I didn't say that. Okay, we have the minutes of the June 24th meeting. I guess the chips are in our arms. Moved by Annie, seconded by Shauna. Any questions on the minutes? All in favor? Hands, that's unanimous. All right, gang, everybody, we are finished. We're late, as always.
And a reminder about the Kevin going,
Kevin, yes, that's right. Kevin McGuire, we're saying things by Kevin at the old jail conference room. Kevin McGuire, right now.
Right now.